a case of thyroid swelling. This case presentation is the sixth in the series of cassette clinics of general surgery prepared by Dr. Ghanashyam Vaidya from Karnataka Health Institute, Ghataprabha, an ex-student of Seth GS Medical College and the KEM Hospital, Mumbai. A 20-year-old Hindu female housewife, Kamala, staying in a village in Thane district, comes with complaints of a swelling in the neck since 2 years. The patient was apparently alright 2 years back when she first noticed a swelling in the middle on her neck to the right of the midline with no accompanying pain or fever. The swelling has gradually increased in size since then. No history of regression in size. Regression, which thyroid swelling regresses in size? Sir, swelling produced by hemorrhage into a degenerated cystic nodule decreases in size over the next few weeks and may even disappear completely. No history of regression in size, no history of rapid increase in size with pain, suggestive of hemorrhage into a pre-existing nodule or a malignant change. There is no history of appearance of new swelling elsewhere in the neck. There is no history suggestive of lymph node swelling. Regarding complications, no. What history have you asked to rule out a lymph node swelling? Sir, there is no history of discharge or sinus from the swelling. No history of evening rise of temperature, loss of weight, cough with expectoration and hemoptysis, or contact with a known case of tuberculosis. No history of swelling elsewhere in the body, bone pains or bleeding gums. No history of swelling in the oral cavity, dysphagia, dyspnea or change in voice. Very good. Now as for the complications. Regarding the pressure effects, no history of dysphagia, dyspnea or hoarseness of voice. No history of nocturnal dyspnea. No history of syncopal attacks. When is nocturnal dyspnea seen? In retrosternal goiter due to pressure on the trachea in recumbent position. No history of recent weight loss, bone pains, swelling in the scalp or lateral part of the neck, suggestive of metastasis from a malignant thyroid. There is no history of thyrotoxicosis, that is, no history of palpitations, chest pain or exertional dyspnea. Patient has not noticed any enlargement of eyeballs. No history of tremors, excitability, insomnia or excessive sweating. No history of increased appetite with loss of weight, and no history of diarrhea or menstrual disturbances. Then there is no history of edema of feet and face with hoarseness of voice and mental lethargy. Regarding etiology, at the onset there was no history of pain and fever, no history of puberty or pregnancy. Patient had menarche at 13 years. MC regular 4/28 with moderate flow. No history of any recent menstrual irregularities. Was it necessary to ask menstrual history in so details? Yes, sir. Thyroid hormones do play a role in the regulation of menstrual cycle. So the alterations in the cycles may not be specific to thyrotoxicosis or myxedema, but history of recent menstrual irregularities calls for a more detailed examination and investigation for abnormalities of thyroid hormones. There is no history of similar swelling in the family or village. What does that tell? Sir, family history of goiter suggests a genetic factor with enzyme deficiency which manifests itself as a goiter whenever iodine intake is low. And incidence of thyroid swellings in the area or village strongly suggests deficiency of iodine in the diet and water as seen in the Himalayan ranges. The endemic goiters are due to deficiency and sporadic goiters are due to goitrogens. Which are the goitrogens that you know of? Vegetables like cabbage containing thiocyanate, the anti-tuberculous drug PAS, antithyroid drugs, and excessive iodine intake. For example, excess of expectorants in asthmatics. Proceed. No history of similar swelling in the family or village. No history of taking antituberculous treatment. No history of irradiation to the neck in childhood. What is the significance? Sir, irradiation to the neck in childhood can result in a papillary carcinoma of thyroid at a later age. And among antituberculous drugs, PAS or para-amino salicylic acid produces goiter. No history of previous medical or surgical treatment taken for the swelling. On local examination, on inspection, how do you inspect a thyroid swelling? Sir, inspection is carried out with the patient sitting upright on a stool with slightly hyperextended neck. If the neck is short or fat, the thyroid can be made more prominent to inspection by Pezzillo's method. The patient clasps her hand behind the occiput and throws the head backwards, pressing the occiput against the resistance of her hands. Yes, and what are your findings on inspection? On inspection, there is a single oval swelling 3 by 2 by 2 centimeters in size to the right of the midline of neck, half centimeter from the midline, and 1 centimeter above the medial end of the clavicle. It has a smooth surface and a well-defined margin. Which thyroid swellings have an uneven surface? Sir, multinodular goiter, which has a characteristic bossellated surface, and carcinoma. And where do you get single nodules? Single toxic nodule, adenoma, cyst, calcified nodules, and papillary carcinoma. Depending on the function as recorded on I-131 scan, a hot or hyperfunctioning nodule is seen in toxic nodule, a warm or normal functioning nodule is seen in functioning adenoma, and cold or non-functioning nodule is seen in papillary carcinoma, hemorrhagic cysts, and calcified nodules. Sometimes a multinodular goiter with a single large nodule also gives an clinical impression of a single nodule. Then how do you differentiate it? If, along with the nodule, the rest of the thyroid gland is not palpable, it is clinically considered as a solitary nodule. And if the rest of the thyroid can be palpated, then it is clinically a multinodular goiter with a single large nodule. That means normally the thyroid gland is not palpable? That's right, sir. Except that its presence can be indirectly inferred from inability to palpate second, third and fourth tracheal rings due to the presence of isthmus. In which conditions is the thyroid gland diffusely enlarged and palpable? Sir, diffuse parenchymatous goiters like the puberty goiter, diffuse colloid goiter, primary toxic goiter and Hashimoto's disease. Go ahead. The overlying skin is normal. No redness, scars, sinuses or fistulae. The swelling rises with deglutition but not on protrusion of tongue. And when it rises, the lower border of the swelling is distinctly visible. Why does the swelling rise up on deglutition? Because it is enclosed by the pretracheal fascia, which fixes it to the laryngeal cartilages. And the cartilages are elevated during deglutition by the superior constrictors of larynx. Does this finding confirm the swelling as thyroid? No, sir. It only means that the swelling is enclosed by or is fixed to the pretracheal fascia. Thyroid is the commonest, but the other swellings that move on deglutition are thyroglossal cyst, subhyoid bursitis, pretracheal and prelaryngeal lymph nodes, and extrinsic carcinoma of larynx. Any other fallacy of this test? Some swellings may arise from the thyroid but do not move on deglutition. For example, a retrosternal goiter or a very large goiter, and fixity to surrounding structures like strap muscles due to inflammation as in chronic thyroiditis or malignant infiltration as in carcinoma of thyroid. Did the swelling rise on protrusion of tongue? No, sir. Why did you do this test? To rule out thyroglossal cyst. Is the swelling in midline? No, sir. It is to the right of the midline. Then was it necessary to perform this test? Yes, sir. Because at the level of the thyroid cartilage, the thyroglossal cyst is always lateral to one side of the midline. Why? Because the thyroid cartilage is angulated anteriorly. Hence, during development, the thyroglossal tract is swept to one side, more commonly to the left. However, above the thyroid cartilage, the thyroglossal cyst is strictly in midline. Why does the thyroglossal cyst move up on protrusion of the tongue? Because it is connected to the foramen cecum of the tongue by thyroglossal duct. How will you confirm this finding? I will ask the patient to open the mouth, hold the swelling between my fingers, and ask her to put out and withdraw the tongue without closing her mouth. An upward tug will be felt when she puts the tongue out. Go ahead. There are no visible pulsations. On palpation from behind by standard method and by Lahey's method, there is no local rise of temperature, no tenderness. Describe the standard method for palpating thyroid. Stand behind the patient with the patient sitting on a lower level on a stool. Encircle the neck with your palms with index fingers under the chin and thumbs over the occiput. Keep the neck slightly flexed and slightly inclined to the side being examined and then palpate. Asking the patient to swallow helps to confirm the upward movement of the swelling and to appreciate smaller nodules. Why did you flex the neck slightly? To relax the sternomastoid and the deep cervical fascia. Why did you palpate from behind? Firstly, it is anatomically convenient with the hollow of the palm fitting over the convexity of the neck without extending the wrist. Secondly, the position of the neck can be manipulated and fixed in flexion between the index fingers under the chin and thumbs over the occiput. Whereas, if palpated from the front, the patient tends to extend the neck, making palpation of the thyroid difficult, and the clavicle also comes in the way of palpating the lower pole. And what is Lahey's method of palpation? Lahey's method is for proper palpation of individual lobes of thyroid, especially the posteromedial surface which lies in the tracheoesophageal groove. Standing in front of the patient, the thumb of one hand is pressed against the side of the upper part of trachea and thyroid, pushing the structures to the opposite side till the patient shows slight discomfort. So the opposite lobe becomes prominent and is pushed out of the tracheoesophageal groove. Now the fingers of the palpating hand are insinuated behind the gland to palpate the posteromedial surface. By this method, deeply situated nodules not felt from the front can be detected. Right, proceed. On palpation, there is no local rise of temperature, no tenderness. The swelling has a smooth surface, firm consistency and a well-defined border, which thyroid swellings have a firm consistency. Nodular goiter, primary toxic goiter and a tense cyst. And which ones are soft? Physiological goiters, parenchymatous goiters and colloid goiter. And stony hard consistency is the characteristic of a serous carcinoma of thyroid, Riddle's thyroiditis, long-standing calcified nodule, and long-standing cases of Hashimoto's and Dequervan's disease. Proceed. The borders. The lateral border is deep to the sternomastoid. The lower border is 1 cm above the clavicle, and tracheal rings can be palpated in the suprasternal notch below the isthmus. Why did you palpate the tracheal rings in the suprasternal notch? To rule out the presence of a retrosternal extension. What is the clinical importance of knowing the presence of retrosternal extension? It is a relative contraindication to medical treatment as the initial increase in the size of the gland on starting antithyroid drugs may compress the trachea at the thoracic inlet and cause respiratory embarrassment. Also, it is an indication for early surgery because delay will mean increase in the size of the swelling and more difficult surgery. Yes. What are the types of retrosternal goiters? Substernal, plunging and intrathoracic. Substernal type is when it is palpable in the neck. Plunging type is when it is behind the sternum but it is pushed into the neck whenever intrathoracic pressure rises as while coughing. And intrathoracic type which is entirely within the superior mediastinum. Which type of goiters show retrosternal extension? Multinodular goiter and adenoma of thyroid. You said that this swelling was deep to the sternomastoid. Can a swelling superficial to sternomastoid be thyroid? No sir, never. because the firm and strong deep cervical fascia which encloses the sternomastoid will never allow a thyroid swelling to grow superficial to it. Proceed. The rest of the thyroid gland is not palpable. What does that mean? It means that this is clinically a solitary nodule. If the rest of the thyroid gland was palpable, it would have been clinically considered as a multinodular goiter with a single large nodule. Yes, but remember that there is no hard and fast rule like that. It is just a clinical generalization because many of the clinically solitary nodules are found to be multinodular on ultrasound or on sectioning the operative specimen. Go ahead. There is no fixity to skin. Platysma sign is negative. What is platysma sign? Ask the patient to turn the neck to the opposite side. If the platysma is infiltrated by the swelling or fixed to the swelling, then it will stand out as longitudinal folds in the direction of the muscle. So there is no fixity to skin and platysma, no restriction of mobility in horizontal or vertical direction, no palpable thrill, which is characteristic of primary thyrotoxicosis due to hypervascularity of the gland, particularly over the upper poles. How did you feel for it? I stood behind the patient and kept the hand lightly over the swelling over the upper pole. The hand must be kept lightly, otherwise thrill may be missed and transmitted pulsations of the carotid may be felt. The carotid artery pulsations are well felt and equal on both sides, but they are displaced slightly backwards on the right side. What is this sign known as? Sir, this is Berry's sign. It states that benign enlargements of the thyroid merely displace the carotid vessels backwards and outwards. So the carotid pulsations are well felt behind the posterior edge of the swelling. Whereas malignant infiltration of a carcinoma of thyroid engulfs the carotid tree, so the carotid pulsations are weakly felt or not felt at all. Which are the other clinical signs indicative of malignancy in thyroid? Rapidly enlarging painless nodule or rapid enlargement of a long-standing nodule, appearance of new nodules in a patient above 40 years age, hard consistency, fixity or restriction of mobility, difficulty in feeling carotid pulsations, tracheal obstruction and hoarseness of voice, Horner's syndrome, and hard lymphadenopathy. Proceed. The trachea is slightly displaced to the left. Cocker's test is negative. How do you demonstrate the Cocker's test? Ask the patient to extend the neck and take deep breath through the open mouth. Now compress the thyroid from both the sides. Appearance of stridor indicates tracheal obstruction, that is positive Cocker's test. What is stridor? Stridor is the shrill, harsh sound produced by passage of air through partially obstructed airway. In which conditions do you get positive Cocker's test? It is typically demonstrated in the scabbard trachea of a long-standing multinodular goiter, where the trachea is flattened anteroposteriorly, and due to tracheomalacia, the tracheal rings are soft, so they get compressed during Cocker's test. It may also be seen in tracheal obstruction due to malignancy and Riedel's thyroiditis. What is scabbard trachea? Scabbard means the sheath of a sword. In long-standing large multinodular goiters, the trachea is compressed from both sides and is gradually converted into an anteroposterior slit. It will be very well appreciated in X-rays in anteroposterior view. Why does the thyroid press upon the trachea and esophagus when it has plenty of space to grow anteriorly? Sir, the anterior layer of pretracheal fascia is very strong and it prevents anterior growth of the gland, whereas posterior layer of the fascia is thin and flimsy and provides the line of least resistance. Hence, thyroid grows backwards and indents into the trachea and esophagus. On percussion, the note over the manubrium sterni is resonant. Why? Because of the underlying trachea. In presence of a retrosternal goiter, it becomes impaired or dull. On auscultation, no systolic bruit over the swelling and over the upper poles of thyroid? Right. Now, after the local examination, we look for the signs of thyrotoxicosis, myxedema, retrosternal extension, and metastasis. Proceed. There are no signs of thyrotoxicosis, that is, no true or apparent exophthalmos. Von Graff's and Geoffroy's sign are negative. No tremors of the outstretched hands or protruded tongue. The skin is normal. Pulse is normal. No tachycardia, irregularity or bounding pulse. How do you look for the exophthalmos? First, ask the patient to sit straight and look horizontally forwards, that is, at a far point at the eye level. Normally, the lower lid margin just touches the limbus at 6 o'clock. In presence of true exophthalmos, sclera is seen between the limbus and the lower lid margin. Secondly, examine by Nafziger's method. With the patient sitting on a stool, stand behind her with a hand on the forehead, drawing the hair out of the way, and inspect the eyeballs from above in line with the forehead. The actual bulging of the eyeball can be appreciated by this method. Why does this bulging occur? Due to excessive deposition of fat in the retrobulbar space, plus in late stages intraorbital edema. What is apparent exophthalmos? Widening of the palpebral fissure due to retraction of the upper eyelid, giving a false appearance of exophthalmos without actual bulging of the eyeball, is termed as apparent exophthalmos. And how do you differentiate it from true exophthalmos? When the patient looks horizontally forwards, sclera is seen between the upper lid margin and the limbus at 12 o'clock, but the lower lid margin is in normal position. And secondly, examination by Nafziger's method shows that there is no actual bulging of the eyeballs. Which is the first sign to appear in exophthalmos? Von Graff's sign of lid lag. What is it? First, fix the patient's head with one hand, then hold the index finger of the left hand at a distance of 18 inches from the patient's eye and ask the patient to look at it as the finger is moved vertically up and down rapidly. Look for the lagging behind of the upper eyelid when the finger is moved downwards. Can you now tell me the various signs of exophthalmos in the order that they appear? The first signs to appear are Von Graff's sign of lid lag and widening of the palpebral fissure due to lid retraction. With moderate exophthalmos, there is actual bulging of the eyeballs as demonstrated by Nafziger's method, and Geoffroy's sign becomes positive, that is, absence of wrinkling of forehead on looking upwards with the head bent downwards. With severe exophthalmos, the bulging of the eyeballs increases further. There is intraorbital congestion, raised intraocular tension, and ophthalmoplegia with positive Mobius sign, that is, difficulty in conversion when the patient is asked to look at a near object. And what is progressive exophthalmos? It is a condition where the exophthalmos continues to increase relentlessly after an otherwise successful treatment of thyrotoxicosis. The acuity of vision decreases with chemosis in the conjunctiva, impaired sensations of cornea with resultant ulcers, and muscular paresis giving rise to exophthalmic ophthalmoplegia. Can you differentiate between an exophthalmos and the bulging of an eyeball due to retroorbital tumor? Yes, sir. The upper eyelid can be everted with ease in case of retroorbital mass with displacement of eyeball, but it is impossible or difficult to evert in thyrotoxicosis. How did you look for the tremors? I asked the patient to stretch out her arms horizontally forwards with the forearms pronated and fingers spread slightly. Then I watched for fine tremors of the fingers. Secondly, I asked her to open her mouth, protrude the tongue slightly without touching the teeth or the lips, and hold it there for 30 seconds. I watched for fibrillary twitching of the tongue. Good, go ahead. There are no signs of myxedema, that is, no thickening of skin, no edema of face and legs, hoarseness of voice or mental lethargy, There are no signs of retrosternal extension. What are the signs of retrosternal extension? On inspection, dilated veins over the chest wall and puffiness of face. On palpation, inability to palpate tracheal rings in the suprasternal notch and inability to see or palpate the lower border of the swelling. On percussion, a dull note over manubrium sterni. Elevation of both arms above the head produces respiratory distress or congestion of the face and presence of Horner's syndrome. What is Horner's syndrome? It is the syndrome resulting from compression of the cervical sympathetic C8 and fibers from T1. It is characterized by constricted pupils, ptosis and narrowing of the palpebral fissure, enophthalmos or recession of the eyeball, reddening of the conjunctiva due to dilatation of the blood vessels after loss of sympathetic vasoconstrictor supply, absence of ciliospinal reflex, and anhidrosis, that is loss of sweating on the affected side of the face. To repeat, constricted pupils, ptosis, enophthalmos, reddening of conjunctiva, absent ciliospinal reflex, and anhidrosis. There are no signs of metastasis, that is cervical lymph nodes are not enlarged, no hard swelling over the skull, chest is normal, no bony tenderness or deformity, per abdomen liver is not palpable and no free fluid. My diagnosis is benign, non-toxic, solitary thyroid nodule with no retrosternal extension and no airway obstruction. Benign, non-toxic, solitary thyroid nodule with no retrosternal extension and no airway obstruction. Yes. What investigations will you ask for? Blood for complete hemogram, blood sugar and HbA1c, blood urea and serum creatinine, ECG for extrasystoles and fibrillations, X-ray of chest for metastasis and retrosternal goiter, X-ray of the neck, AP and lateral for deviation and compression of the trachea and for calcifications in thyroid as seen in follicular carcinoma or old hemorrhagic nodules, ultrasonography to study the thyroid gland structure to identify nodules, their size, number, position and whether they are solid or cystic, and also detect cervical lymph nodes. Then the specific investigations: sleeping pulse rate, direct or indirect laryngoscopy for cord palsy, and thyroid function tests, that is serum T3, T4 and TSH study. For nodules, FNAC guided by ultrasonography if necessary to get histopathological diagnosis, and I-131 study to see whether the nodule is functioning or cold. Good. How do you check the sleeping pulse rate? I will check the sleeping pulse rate in early morning at 4 or 5 am, that is about 2 hours before the scheduled time to get up without disturbing the patient. Sleeping pulse rate gives a clinical judgment of thyrotoxicosis. Up to 90 per minute mild, 90 to 110 per minute moderate, and more than 110 per minute is considered as severe thyrotoxicosis. And why do you do indirect laryngoscopy? Indirect laryngoscopy for vocal cord movement is medico-legally important before surgery and should be performed even if voice is normal, because gradual onset unilateral nerve palsy is well compensated and there may be no noticeable change in voice. Do you know any other tests which are not routinely done now? Sir, basal metabolic rate, measurement of tendon reflexes, protein bound iodine with charcoal T3 uptake test which gives the free thyroxine index, and if the results are equivocal, radioactive I-131 study with T3 suppression test. However, now the hormone levels in the blood are directly assessed, so these tests have no relevance. Yes. How will you treat this case? Sir, this is a solitary nodule which is clinically euthyroid. So I will advise surgery right hemithyroidectomy with frozen section biopsy. If malignant on frozen section, then the operation will proceed to total thyroidectomy. If it was hyperfunctioning with raised levels of T3, T4, then excision of the nodule with right hemithyroidectomy or ablation of radioiodine can be considered. And if you had a multinodular goiter, then I will advise partial thyroidectomy, that is, leave behind as much of normal thyroid tissue on each side as possible, approximately the size of a normal thyroid gland. However, all nodules must be removed, which may necessitate removal of almost the whole of the gland. How do you treat thyrotoxicosis? For mild thyrotoxicosis, I will advise rest and tranquilizers to control the symptoms. Then add a antithyroid drug carbimazole up to 10 mg TDS and then maintain with 10 to 15 mg per day. If antithyroid drugs show no adequate response or are associated with side effects, then I will advise surgery, subtotal or total thyroidectomy. If the patient is a high risk for surgery, radioiodine ablation may be preferred. Also, if the patient is above 40 years of age, if the goiter is small and FNAC report is benign, radioiodine ablation should be considered. And if the report of FNAC is malignancy, for papillary carcinoma, total thyroidectomy, as it is a multicentric tumor, plus removal of enlarged cervical lymph node, no radical neck dissection, followed by lifelong thyroxine supplement. Follicular carcinoma, total thyroidectomy, the surgery should be followed by bone scan, and if active metastasis be present anywhere in the body, ablate them by radioiodine. Anaplastic carcinoma, only radiotherapy, but if the thyroid capsule is not infiltrated and there are no metastases, then total thyroidectomy is justified. In medullary carcinoma, total thyroidectomy with resection of the involved lymph nodes or radical neck dissection. Very good. Thank you, sir. This concludes the 6th case presentation in the series of cassette clinics of general surgery by Dr. Ghanashyam Vaidya.